This week, part 1 of our chat with Viking hair god Brian Chambers about his career in video games in the ATV interview. Lead writer Dave Haddock explores the origins and design of the Theron system in the Loremaker's Guide to the Galaxy. And we look at the continuing development of EVA and Star Citizen in the ATV Fast Forward. All this and more in this week's Around the Verse.
Yeah, pretty cool. The explosion VFX just keep getting better, and the action looks really neat. We should really savor the moment.
Oh, boy. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of ATV. I am Sandy Gardner, Head of Marketing.
I'm Ben Lesnick, and this is our weekly community show where those of us here at Cloud Imperium Games tell you what's going on with Star Citizen.
And Squadron 42.
And Squadron 42.
And Ben, what is the latest on Star Citizen?
Well, we pushed Star Citizen Alpha 2.3.1 on Friday. That's a mouthful, but it is essentially a small update to address some bug issues, some balancing, some performance stuff. We're just continually improving.
And what are we working on right now?
The team is working on Star Citizen Alpha 2.4, which is our next major patch. We are on content lockdown right now, and QA is starting to test builds that have all the features we want to put out. Once we're confident of what we'll actually be releasing, we'll let people know some more details. But the hope is that this is going to be the build with the very first inklings of persistence.
So with persistence, does that mean that everything's now permanent?
Nope. We'll have a ways to go before we have our kind of kickoff of the universe starting and growing, but you will start to see individual elements get carried over between play sessions, such as your reputation when you're off causing criminal mischief, or your weapons loadouts between ship spawns. And it's just going to continue growing from there as we build more and more of this technology as we get it online, just like the rest of Star Citizen.
The monthly report of March is now up on the comm link. You can check out and read the comprehensive updates from each of our studios.
The report also included a pretty cool video showing off our new EVA transition system, which is how we're hopefully making our kind of transition from zero gravity into like walking around the ground seamless. It's a lot more natural than it was before. Check it out.
And much to Ben's excitement, there was a Wing Commander live stream on the weekend. How did it go?
We had a great time. We played through all of Secret Missions 2, thanks to Jared and Toast for coming along and listening to me talk for 8 hours. Check out a clip. Scottish guy.
Can I do it, Scottish? I'm glad you had a good shore leave, lad. I thought I'd be flying downside for a wee stay, but they've cancelled all shore leave. I like visiting planets. Maybe that's what I'll do when I'll retire next month. Buy a small ship and spend my days flying from planet to planet. But I have a... Oh my god, you were going so fast. Now you doubt that. Why is it going so fast?
That's a good idea, James.
Looking forward, we are kicking off a free fly this Friday in honor of the PAX East event that is starting on this Friday.
And we're also going to have a small tax day sale on Friday where we'll be bringing back some surplus military ships such as the Gladius, Gladiator, Retaliator, and Super Hornet.
Actually, Ben, the Super Hornet is a civilian variant based on the military F-7A ship.
Ah.
Yeah, kind of like how the Hummer is to the Humvee.
Ah, well, it'll be in the sale anyway.
See, I can do me some splaining. And if you were fooled by our April 1st career post, check your email. We've sent every backer who clicked to buy a Big Benny's Reliant a $5 coupon.
You can pick up a skin or a ship or whatever you want.
Have you ever thought to yourself, I'd love a Star Citizen track jacket, as well as a notepad, some cards, and a pen?
Well, gosh, Sandy, I wonder that all the time.
No, to be honest, we actually just received some track jackets in the office because we're going to do a new staff photo in this office. And we also have them on sale, and you get a little freebie notepad, pen, and cards with it. The cards are actually very cool.
Wow, so that's a discount on the track jacket plus free cards.
Yay, we should play card games.
All right.
He's up for it. Finally, we are very excited to announce the next Star Citizen concept ship, which will be, drumroll, the MISC Prospector.
The Mist Prospector is our so-called small mining ship, and you'll be learning all about it in about a week. Wanted to go ahead and give you a heads up on the price. It's going to be $140 for the concept pledge, and it's looking really cool. It's been developed by the folks in the UK. If you love the lines on the Freelancer, you're definitely going to like this one. It's a Mist ship through and through.
Cool. And now let's check in with our studios around the world to find out what they've been working on in this week's News from Around the Verse.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Cloud Imperium Games Los Angeles. I'm production coordinator Darian Vorlick, and today I've got with me
Eric Pietro, QA.
So here we are with this week's update. So on the LA end, as far as tech design wise, we've got the tech designers who are actually working on getting the Reliant flight ready. So that's something that's looking pretty awesome. So hopefully you guys get to see that soon. On the engineering and tech design side, we've also got them refactoring the component system to be functional with the new item system 2.0 that Mark Abent and Paul Reindel have been re-engineering for the game. So that's on the development side. What we got on your end for QA?
A lot of regression. We're going through like flight balance right now, quantum jumps, working on the EVA system as well. Just a lot of sweeping right now, getting ready for 2.4.
So if I remember correctly, you said you have 1,500 bugs that have been fixed that need to be regressed?
That's right. And we're trying to get through that as quick as possible.
It's a lot of bugs. So we'll get back to work here. Just take a little bit of your time. So once again, I'm Darian Vorlick.
I'm Eric Pietro.
And this is Los Angeles signing off.
Hey guys, Jake Ross here, producer of the Austin Studio, and I'm here with you this week to talk a little bit about what's going on here in Austin. First things first, I'm going to talk a little bit about something that's not going on here in Austin, but still relates to what we're doing here, is the Port Olisar changes that we're making. So the team in the UK and the team at Behavior are working together to update the Port Olisar station. Like I've mentioned previously, it's coming along really nicely. We have a new commercial galleria area that we're going to be housing our shops in Crusader. So not only will our shops be available on Area 18, but we'll also have them on Crusader, which is cool. We'll have to do probably some rebranding on some of the shops because fictionally there are some shops that are completely local to Area 18. So we've got Dave Haddock meeting with their environment team and kind of come up with a different option there. But yeah, so that's coming along really nicely. We've got that out of white box and into gray box. Final art is in progress as well. We've got a VFX and lighting pass coming up. So it's a really cool looking area. We're excited to show that off. We've got a brand new elevator that'll take you to it. It'll be cool seeing players walk around Crusader buying stuff. So we also have the new flight suit, which is in and done. The character team has been working on updating the Sadabal costume that you guys may have seen in a few promotional materials to be the new flight suit. So we have, or undersuit rather. This suit will be the kind of the preliminary layer underneath all the armors for the future. So, but we'll be selling those. We'll be putting them up on mannequins in the Cubby Blast shop. Or equivalent on Port Olisar, and those will be available for sale. We'll have different colors and variants you can choose from. So that'll be kind of one of the options as part of the switch to this new kind of item 2.0 that you probably heard about that we've been working on. The old legacy armors, which is the light, medium, heavy Marine, the light, medium, heavy Outlaw, and the flight suits will all be ready and to be sold and used in Crusader. So you'll be able to kind of to mix and match however you like, which is cool. So with that comes along the ability to switch between civilian and armor loadouts. So the flight suit is technically part of the armor loadout. There will be these new kind of valet. They call them Easy Hab Valet clothing storage is kind of a mouthful, but it's kind of what we're calling it. Is going to be like this little valet kind of clothing storage locker area right next to the airlocks in Port Olisar, so that you actually will be able to, before you leave the airlock, you can go to this Easy Hab Valet system and access it. And it'll swap your loadout from civilian to armor, so that you can actually go out into space without dying. So that's cool. It's nice that you'll be able to kind of do this, because you'll be able to come in after landing on Port Olisar. You'll be able to go through the airlock after a busy day of completing missions and finding and killing wanted people, and be able to kind of take a load off, take your armor off, put it in this Easy Hab clothing storage, and switch to your civilian loadout, and just hang around Port Olisar with your friends in t-shirts and shorts and pants and jackets and just normal people clothes. And then when you're ready to go out on another mission, you can go through the airlock to the Easy Hab clothing valet and switch back to your armor and go back out in space. So it's kind of this cool little feature that we've got in place, just to kind of give players a little something if they want to switch between the clothing and the armor. So that's in progress as well. We have the port modification UI in place finally, and it's really cool. We got Simon White and Zane over in the UK who kind of helped out with this, and they created this new UI for this port modification app in the mobiGlas. It's some of you may remember the Shipworks app that we kind of advertised way back in the day. It's kind of the first little foray into this new app for Shipworks, and you'll be able to access the UI. It'll have a nice pretty list right there for putting things in different places. And I've talked a lot about the port modification app in the past few weeks, but it's a really exciting new thing that we're having a ball playing with. We're excited to put that in your hands as well. So yeah, I think that's really the big updates for this time, guys. I'm running out of time, so I'll talk to you next week. Thanks. See ya.
Hi everyone, Tom here, and welcome to the UK again. This week, to spice things up, I've brought along Mickey Oliver, a QA tester who's just recently joined Foundry 42. So I wanted you guys to all get introduced. And Mickey, do you want to tell us a little bit about what it is you're going to do here?
Yes, I'm Mickey, and I am QA here at Foundry 42, and I'll be working on the community feedback sort of side of things. So you might see me in the forums and on Discord, just chatting to people, trying to get feedback for the new PTUs and just new patches that we're going to bring out and things like that.
Mm-hmm. There's an awful lot of feedback out there, so we do definitely need more eyes on the forums.
We want to hear things, we want to hear what's going on.
Cool. So what have you kind of been working on so far then? You've only been here.
Yes, well, I've been getting used to the game itself, and getting used to all the control changes and stuff. And I've been looking at a few ships.
Cool. Which ships have you got your hands on?
Mainly the Starfarer at the moment.
Exciting, yeah.
Yeah, just getting used to the place.
Quite a big ship, the Starfarer.
It is, yeah. I don't think I've been in every room yet. It is pretty big.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks very much for joining us, Mickey.
Okay.
Hope you guys enjoyed that, and yeah, look out for Mickey on the forums in the near future. So So thanks very much, guys. We'll see you in the verse.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey everyone, Brian Chambers from the Frankfurt office. I will jump right into it and tear down what the team's been doing since you heard from me last. On the game code side, focusing on bugs as they do. Been working on phase 2 of the player health system and adding debug functionality into that, or additional debug functionality to help us quickly go down and break down if we have any issues. They're working also with design for feedback on what's been implemented so far, so they get it their hands and they get to play with it. Level design, shopping district for Port Olisar and pirate base for PU, and also some on-site interviews. I believe we had 2. Those take up pretty much like a full day almost of the team's time. System design, AI characters and perception, reputation 2.0, and interactors and inner thought. On AI, working with interactors, as said, the first version's up and running. That's what allowed us to give it to designers to play with and start giving feedback. They're doing some work on how to disable collisions on characters for if and when needed in any case scenarios. Ongoing work and discussions with Subsumption. Subsumption's fairly large, so that'll be ongoing for quite a while. Bug fixing for both Live and S42. Again, something that'll be ongoing pretty much across all disciplines. The moment you put something in locally, you need to test it across everything else and modify what you need to make sure everything works as it should. And they're also working with design on how to integrate Subsumption into combat and documenting stuff on there that would make the most sense on how to use that. On the engine code side, we've done some code work to expand the support for water volumes. That's not only for procedural planets, but also for other things we have going on. Working with build ops to roll out try-build for the team. Server performance and client performance debugging and work. Editor debugging. The editor is a place where large majority of the team does work, so constantly going in there to make sure that it's as efficient as possible, is performing as quickly as possible, and has the functionality is huge for us. In that, they also implemented a new free flight camera control in the editor. With Marco, we continued pushing on procedural planets. Stuff's going good, terrain's looking good, things are progressing step by step. Bug fixes for live and game dev, improvements and bug fixing for track view. Again, I've mentioned that in the past. That's for Hannes and the guys there. Get the functionality they need to be able to put together the cinematics as efficiently as they need. Well, on physics, just rattling through my head. On physics, worked on fixing projectiles to function with the local physics grid. Also did some refactoring on the physics grid. Again, once we implement new things, once you see how it all starts working together, we have to go through and debug. It's common practice with what we're doing. Also worked on fixing a few audio-related issues. We also had a new engine programmer join our team last week, Anis. We started him off, or the engine team started him off with giving him some bugs for him to go in and get his chops up on the engine a bit in specific areas that we want him to handle in the coming future. On weapons, since we've talked last, we've finalized 2 weapons and we started 2 new weapons. Cinematic side, progress is going good. Can't give away details of what they've been putting together, but they're definitely making progress. Judith is on board now, our cinematics producer, senior cinematics producer, and we're starting to wrangle some stuff for an upcoming mocap shoot. So starting those discussions on pre-pro to make sure that we're prepared as we need to be. I think that's pretty much it for the team. I've tried to jump on the forums this week and answer some questions. Keep them coming. If you got questions for me, you got questions for the Frankfurt guys, whether it be design, cinematics, engine, I'll try to pass them out and get some answers as quick as I can. Cool. Thanks again. See you next week.
Now let's jump back to Frankfurt for the first part of the interview with Foundry 42 Frankfurt's design director, Brian Chambers.
Is that Justin Chambers' brother?
No. Did Jared write that joke?
No, I wrote that joke.
Oh boy. Well, he did get a haircut, so maybe.
Maybe stupider.
Yeah. I do like your haircut.
Thank you. I like your haircut too.
I didn't get one, but I'll take it.
Well, you had one at some point.
I did have one at some point. Oh, Lord.
I like the current state of your hair.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. On this week's ATV interview, we're sitting down with Development Director out of Foundry 42 Frankfurt, Mr. Brian Chambers. Brian, how you doing, man?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. We feel like we know you from the news from around the verse segments. And when we do these news from around the verse segments, we tell people, yeah, give us a minute, give us 90 seconds, whatever, talk about the stuff you want and whatnot. And then Brian Chambers comes in like a Viking warrior, and he's like, here's 5 minutes of everything that we're doing here in Frankfurt.
Hey, but dude, I don't put fluff in there. I hit the point. I go, this is what we're doing. This is what people want, right?
No, we love it. Thank you so much for doing it.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad we got some time to sit down and chat. I decided we couldn't do it in person, but we're making do here.
Yep.
So you're Brian Chambers. You're the development director at Foundry 42. Start us off real quick. What does a development director do?
Development director directs development.
All right. Well, that's been your ATV interview for...
Really, my position here is a lot right now is getting the office up and running. We'll talk in a bit. We kind of started with nothing and built up, and here we are today. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to make sure it's transparent to the guys on the floor. At the same time, there's a lot of stuff I'm doing, focusing on hiring to bring it in and build up the team, get the right talent, the right skill set that we need. And on top of that, I'm now looking also at, kind of at a high level and mid-level on what each department's doing to make sure that we're on track and we're nailing what we need to nail.
All right. So why don't we start at the beginning with Brian Chambers. Tell me how you got started in video game development.
It was too long ago. It makes me feel old. I have been working with digital stuff for just about 20 years now. I went to art school, a school in California called California Institute of the Arts, originally started by Disney and Chouinard Dance School and so on. So I went there for fine arts. So I was painting, sculpting, doing the whole bit. After there, I ended up in an effects studio, and we were doing special effects. I did special effects for about 6 years. And
for movies, for television?
Yeah, for movies and TV. So worked on a few different seasons of Star Trek Voyager, so on and so on. Lots of TV shows, lots of kids animated shows, and so on. When we were doing the practical effects, that was old school stuff, right? You really didn't have the power to create particles and stuff as you do now today. So we were blowing up stuff against green screen and high-speed film and comping it in, right? You were getting splinters in your hands at the end of the day. It was pretty cool. And then I turned more and more and more into digital. So from building stuff to then actually building stuff digitally. In school, I had done a lot in animation, as well as kind of part of my fine arts. So then I fell into animation at the studio. They had a very, very old motion capture system. That was before optical was really used for any entertainment value. It was more in the medical field. So we had an old system. I learned it. So it was only me and one other guy that knew how to run the system. In a short amount of time, the studio landed an animated show called Roughnecks, the Starship Troopers Chronicles. I ended up working on that for 2.5 or 3 years. That forced us to use mocap, and it was me and one other guy in the studio that knew how to use it, right? So it was sink or swim. So I pushed more on the animation side. Again, I was there for about 6 or 7 years. The studio finally went under after a bunch of ups and downs. At that point, I switched over fully into games. When I was at the first studio, we were doing some outsourcing work kind of for studios. Game studios would come in and use our motion capture services, and so I'm cleaning up data and shooting stuff for in-game moves, but I still wasn't fully in games. After that studio, though, I jumped into a place called Shiny Entertainment, and that was run by David Perry. They were working on Enter the Matrix, which was the first Matrix game. So I worked there for a couple years, working with the Wachowski brothers on all of the cutscenes or the cinematics they had. And that was a chore because I think there was 3.5 hours of cinematics in that game.
Yeah.
So I go from doing effects to then basically being kind of a lead cinematic animator. After that, I left. After there for a few years, and I worked at Rockstar San Diego. I was an animation director there for a few years. Worked on a bunch of titles over there. After that, me and a few guys decided that we wanted to do our own thing. So we kind of took a leap and started our own company. We probably got up to about 75 or 80 people at one point. When we started, we immediately got acquired by a publisher, THQ. We were all still pretty young, but we had mortgages and stuff to pay, so it was a little too risky to do it on our own. And you really didn't have the concept of crowdfunding or anything at that point, right?
Yeah.
So we started up our own company. After about 2 years there, they decided that our company should kind of disperse. And so they let some people go and other people they wanted to retain. For myself at that company, I wore a tremendous amount of hats. I was basically animation director. I was art director from my background of being within art. I also ran a lot on the production, basically being the development director there as well, and working with budget and working with marketing and so on. At that point, they said I could, THQ was cool and said, hey, you have the option to look around. Look around within THQ, let us know what you want to do. And at that point, I remember looking at the VP that was telling me that, and I said, well, how much time do I have? What are we talking here? He's like, well, if you don't find anything within 6-7 months, we should talk, right? And that was an awesome opportunity because, that showed me that they believed that I was at least of value, right? I looked around and I ended up going to their corporate headquarters and working out of their corporate office. They had just acquired the license for UFC. MMA, a bunch of punching and kicking and rolling around on the ground. And they were struggling with animation. I'm one to usually take on projects that are fairly ambitious. And I thought they're going for realism, thinking of two guys independently controlled, going at it, punching, rolling on the ground. That was pretty ambitious. So I took that gig. I was the animation director partway through, and then they said, well, how about you become the art director as well? So important to point out in that part was at the publisher level, we had basically all the leads and directors there, right? So we had a team of probably 12 people. The main development happened in Japan, in Osaka, Japan. So for about 4 years of my life, I was in Los Angeles for 3 weeks, and we'd get on a plane and go to Japan for a week. And I did that for about 4 years, which was pretty nuts.
Jeez.
Yeah, it takes its toll, but I earned my miles in the process.
I guess.
Yeah.
You said you worked for, just before we move on too far, I said you worked for Rockstar San Diego. What games did you work on when you were there?
We had finished up the original Red Dead, the original one that I think at that point had been in development for like 6 years or something. Worked on some Midnight Club, worked on some GTA stuff with Rockstar North. And then we had our own game that we were pushing that was under codename Agent, I believe, that ultimately went away. I heard it was almost resurrected a couple times, but...
I've heard that it comes up, and every once in a while you'll see an article about it.
Yeah. And it was cool. They actually pulled in mechanics and little bits that we could see in further GTAs when I look through them and play them, so...
Gotcha. And what'd you work on at THQ before you decided to go to corporate?
THQ, that was another big open world game that completely got killed. But it was a big open world. The working title was Revolution, and you kind of work through these Mexican and Spanish favelas, using propaganda to kind of build up people around you and build up followers to help overthrow areas. Very much kind of a risk. I take this area, then this area, and this area. So it was cool. I still actually have the design docs for that. I worked on that for a good amount of time. Learned a lot about drug cartels over that time. And I was certain at that point that, you know, if there's any hit list on crap that you look up on the internet, I'm on it. Because it had every propaganda, every conspiracy group, that was my gig, just doing that research to get it, pulled into that world. So.
All right. Well, when I come out there in August, I want to see that stuff. That sounds
Absolutely.
Interesting to me. All right. So you're at THQ Corporate.
I'm at THQ Corporate. Give you some of the abridged version of that then. So I'm on UFC. UFC blows it out of the water. We sold like over 4 million units at the time, and that was big. They said, hey, Brian, you're successful. Thank you. How about you take on these other licenses as well? So it was the Fight Group, we were called, and they also own the WWE license. So now I go from punching and kicking to more wrestling, right? But that was cool. That was fun. Working with the WWE. The developer for the WWE franchise was also in Japan. It was a sister studio of the other one.
Yep.
So now I flash forward. We're using all of these outsourcers to help build characters and build environments, usually all throughout Asia. So now I'm going to Osaka to work on UFC for 4 days. Then I would jump to Yokohama to work on WWE for 4 days. And then we jump over for a few days to China or to Korea to, be face-to-face with vendors that we're working with. So yeah, it was a pretty nuts few years. In that process, we also, I think we put out 3 separate UFC titles. I was at THQ for a total of, I think, 7 years.
Wow.
So a few UFC titles, a WWE title every single year.
Yeah.
We had I think there was some Facebook titles we put out there. We put a UFC Fit title once that was a Wii game, right? I look back at some of this stuff and I'm like, eh. So after yeah, it is. After I did that for a little bit, then they made me, which was a little silly, and I can say this now because THQ no longer exists. I was art director, but they gave me all these additional responsibilities, right? And they wanted me to be in more of a global position, looking at other things. And so they basically started giving me more and more responsibility, and they wanted me to go to the other sister THQ studios, which at that time they had like 12 of them. They wanted me to go to these studios and work with the guys and help direct stuff to make sure it was on point of where it needed to be. But they didn't want to give me a title. They didn't want to give me a title from art director to director, art, because it meant 2 things. It wasn't a change in salary at that point. It meant that I got a parking spot, and they were short on parking spots. And it also meant that I could travel business class if I wanted. And they knew how much I traveled. And they went, oh crap, if we do that, his budget's nuts, right? So finally, after I think another 4 or 5 months, they did change my title. And I still flew economy because at the end of the day, and it's similar to now, you know, we want to spend our money as wisely as possible. And I go, look, if I fly economy and that means we save $1,000, then, you know, somebody else gets an extra monitor in the office, or right? It's all a balance. So yeah, so then I was I kind of, since I was at THQ for so long, I was in all of their corporate meetings, and for me, the writing was on the wall. I had been there through 3 separate sets of VPs. There were decisions that were being made and so on, and that really put it kind of in a bad financial situation. So I decided to look around. As I decided to look around, Crytek was one of those options in Frankfurt, and which I ultimately took. Excuse me, at that point they were working on Rise. It was just starting to get some more momentum. It's going to be a launch title. It was fairly ambitious what they were trying to push. They needed help with animation. So I came in, was helping with animation for a while. And while I was there was a really, really strong team. I kept asking questions saying, well, you know, where's this, based on my experience and seeing it from a publisher level and down in the trenches. I kept asking a bunch of questions. Well, after a while of me asking questions and kind of raising flags, the studio director at the time, this guy by the name of Nick, pulled me aside and said that Shavat wants me to help finish the game. And so then they made me senior producer. And before I agreed to it, I said, well, what does that mean? I said, I can't just be a yes man and run around and go crazy. And they said, no, you're the final call on stuff. Obviously, you'll work with the owners and so on. So the next week, Shavat Yerli moved his desk right next to mine. And for the next 6 months, we worked our butts off to finish Rise as the launch title. And it made it out there and looked pretty cool. Then I was still at Crytek for about another 12 months or so, until I started to, you know, just personally for a bunch of different reasons, thought it'd be time to look around elsewhere.
Okay. And that brings us to, you discover Star Citizen.
Yes.
So tell me what that was like.
One thing I'd like to point out here is we have the $10 million stretch goal for the motion capture setup. Thank you very much. We hit that, and we got the system, and you're actually seeing the first results of the motion capture. We got it about a month ago, and we 3 days of capture. We're like walking around, and here's what the really cool thing is that we forgot to capture a crouch. And we went back and got this last week. And that's all just because we got the system set up in the studio. Pretty awesome. Now, it's not really a great hangar unless you can get inside and check out your ship. So, here we go.
Hello, welcome to another edition of Loremaker's Guide to the Galaxy. If you're unfamiliar with this segment, this is basically we take some time with a member of the lore team to dig into some of the systems that you see on the star map, and ultimately we'll be able to play and visit and inhabit in the Star Citizen universe. And so we'll just get started. So today, we are actually going to start with kind of a smaller system, but sort of a personal favorite of mine, because Will took Elysium, which I love the Tavaran, and so I'm a little upset about that. Anyway, so we're actually going to do the Farron system. Now, if you remember some of the, if you are subscribers, you saw a Jump Point Galactic Guide that sort of highlighted Farron's system, gave you a bit of an idea. So we'll go into this sort of overall sense of the system, sort of the planets themselves, and a little bit into the sort of the backstory and kind of what's fun about them. But they're kind of a sneaky one, because I really like them just because visually feels like it's a very rich world. But okay, so let's jump right in. So this is not Farron's system that we're looking at now. This is a planet called Earth, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point and talk about. I don't know what happens there off the top of my head. So we'll go Farron's system. And bookmark. So Farron's system, actually, you know what? Actually, before we dive in, let's actually go a little bit more macro. So we're going to zoom out here. So you can see its sort of proximity to Sol system here. So Earth there, Farron here. Let's turn on jumps. So you can see it's very close. So it's, Croshaw, which famously was the first system that Nick Croshaw discovered, which led to this idea that, oh wow, we don't need to, physically burn our way towards these other star systems. We actually have these tunnels that we can use to get there, which completely, obviously, revolutionized kind of thinking as far as astro travel. So basically, the idea was once that happened, and people started to realize that this happened once, so it's a good possibility that it could happen again. It sort of created this new culture of nav jumpers, explorers, and sort of inflamed this sort of notion of like, we need to kind of start re-examining our galaxy and with this new understanding and see what we can find out. So in the year 2460, basically, Farron's system was discovered coming out of Croshaw, right there. And so the funny thing about the way it was discovered by a guy named Pally Lamette, who was part of a Sol Astro Exploration Society. And it was sort of if you think of those sort of classic, if you read League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Alan Quatermain, explorer type things, these sort of gentlemen that would, go out and be exploring the galaxy and stuff like that. That was sort of the impetus, the idea behind them. So he was in charge. He was captain of a ship who was out looking for potentially new jump points, and so they were sort of at the end of their tether. They were about to run out of supplies and stuff like that. And basically, one of his crew, named Darcy Farron, ended up discovering that there was a weird anomaly with their gas. Basically, like their fuel was not adding up, and through exploration, they ended up discovering that it was basically kind of getting drained. And so they started scanning, and they ended up discovering that it was actually a jump point that was sort of causing this sort of weird fuel anomaly. And that's what ended up leading to the discovery of Farron's system. And so as sort of compensation, which for discovering this, he decided to name the system after Darcy. So, and then of course, being part of the Sol Astro Exploration Society, it was all for the benefit of humanity's advancement and stuff like that. So they donated the system basically to at the time it was the UNE, United Nations of Earth, and for basically expansion into. So Farron's system was then born. So one of the things we always sort of discover when we kind of work this stuff out is when a system is discovered, basically there's a period where the reigning government, which in this case would be the UNE, would sort of analyze and assess the system. And so they would take time before kind of opening up to the public, where they would look at the planets and they would kind of do a sort of surveying gig to see what the system held. Was there, I mean, potentially any dangers, all that type of stuff. And once things started to get a little crazier, as they do in the next few hundred years, once this sort of rapid age of expansion starts, they started to slip a little bit on that kind of stuff. But so when they got into Farron, they basically looked around and started scanning it, and they basically discovered that it was 4 planets. And we zoom right in here to the star, which is very big and bright. It is, I'm sure as all of you can see, it is a F-type main sequence dwarf star. So basically you have Farron 1, as you can see right here, is very, very small. Although it doesn't like to say that, but it's technically a mesoplanet, and basically it was sort of uninteresting. A lot of these planets just turned out to be sort of like meh. We can take it or leave it. They couldn't terraform it, so it was sort of but it was very, very close to the star, which is sort of the one unique, as you can see here, aspect to it. So you have. Then next in line, you have Farron 2, which is a terrestrial coreless planet. So there's no atmosphere on the planet, and soil samples basically determined that there was no real minerals there to harvest. A few minerals there were there, they ended up kind of cleaning out rather quickly. The big thing with Farron and sort of the immediate association with it when sort of approaching the system and breaking it down was sort of thinking of a once thriving, popular, very rich, resource-heavy system that suffered a complete and total economic collapse. So it died, but it's still trudging on type thing was sort of the idea. So we have basically Farron 3, which is somewhere on here, Asura. So Asura was basically heavy resources, tons of stuff to mine. So mining became immediately like the #1 thing to do there. And so as such, basically they were able to extract a lot of minerals, and make a lot of money. And so a lot of money, like industry moved in there, started building up the city, the main city, or sort of the landing zone that we're sort of thinking now is called Tram, was sort of this massive industrial mega city, effectively, and it was like that for a very, very, very long time. Basically, Tram and Farron fueled the economy of the UNE, and so when they were first looking at the planet, they realized that there were so many resources there that they had to be smart about how they divided it up. They couldn't just do a land rush because it would just get too crazy. And so the idea was that basically they were trying to mediate basically the land rights and the mining rights and stuff like that for the planet. And it was so messed up, and they kind of screwed the pooch so badly on it that the government ended up, because at the time, bear in mind that this was still the United Nations of Earth, so Earth was very much the center point of the universe and the expansion. So, Croshaw system didn't necessarily have much representation. They were represented by nations, of Earth type thing. So, what ended up happening was once this system basically came to be, and they were trying to break apart this planet to assign mining rights, it got so screwed up that some people actually claimed that, or believed that, it's what triggered the transition into the United Planets of Earth, which became the sort of is sort of the early foundation framework for what would ultimately become the UEE. So planets would gain equal representation along with Earth and stuff like that. And so, so it basically, on one hand, ended up pushing humanity forward in a way that they probably didn't necessarily anticipate. So basically just think massive development, massive mining operations, tons of money. Gold rush type, that type of tone to it. So just a lot of money in there and presumably probably a lot of crime moved in along with it, because that kind of tends to go hand in hand. But it was on a fast track. So it basically got it was one of the big boys, if you will, of the UPE, because it was such a massive economic force within the planets. And I mean, this went on for centuries, literally. And so basically, even through most of the Messer era, once they rose to power, it was still, they probably gained kind of a reputation that they were untouchable because they came from such a position of power and resource that they were almost untouchable. But you know, these being kind of fanatical family of despots, you know, they will find a way. But they didn't manage to last until the last Messer, Messer 11, who was Linton Messer, if I remember correctly, who basically falsely accused the system of housing dissidents and tried to put them on lockdown. It was obviously very untrue because he was kind of a lunatic, but scared enough people that thought that the hammer of the Messers was coming down, that they ended up, some of the wealthier citizens and people just started fleeing the system because they just didn't want to be a part of whatever kind of bad stuff was about to go down there. And there was a whole thing, if you've read the story about the 78th Squadron, got orders to kill civilians and they refused, and it was this sort of big to-do. And then luckily, you know, the Messers were overthrown the next year, so, you know, yay. So the system managed to kind of limp on, but the sort of mortal strike had already kind of happened, and it was starting to falter. And then it wasn't until the sort of mid-29th century where they started, sort of the unthinkable was happening, where they were running out of stuff to mine. There was only so much that they could do. Basically, the system started to dry up. Whatever money that was still there was starting to realize that they were taking losses by trying to, you know, strangle whatever minimal resources from the ground that they could. And so companies started leaving, and then basically they had nothing lined up, you know, that could offer the type of income, basically, or export that their mining stuff had. And so the system basically just sort of completely collapsed and fell on itself. So, which leads to the thing I love about it, you know, Tram as a city, you sort of imagine these sort of massive, you know, I was thinking of, like, you know, early 1900s, like Chicago, you know, Detroit, you know, like these sort of massive just buildings and just beautiful structures of industry and stuff like that are now just abandoned and falling apart and stuff like that. At the time, I was actually reading a really fun book. Well, not reading, but I had a fun book called Detroit Disassembled, which is an urban exploration photography book that's just these beautiful pictures of downtown Detroit and just sort of the state of sort of urban decay and stuff like that. And it's really beautiful. I mean, sad and beautiful, and, you know, but that was sort of the thing that whenever I think of Tram is what I kind of think of, these sort of like huge, beautiful buildings that just sort of represented at one point sort of the pinnacle of you know, human industry and commerce and stuff like that are now just these sort of shadows of what they used to be and stuff like that, and this sort of the people that are still there and stuff. So it's one of those places that, you know, if I'm ever trying to work out a character and I kind of want them to give them an inherent edge, to me, Tram is always the first place I think of like, oh, they should come from Tram because they've clearly had a really hard upbringing. And also, actually, if you look at the Gent Gallen, I believe in the news updates, who had been caught trying to, as a spy in Xi'an territory, he was from Tram. So that's sort of kind of that sort of background. Okay, so that's a very long description of Asura. And then way out there, we have Farron 4, which is a gas giant. And it's a gas giant. You can't live there. Presumably you have fuel that you can grab from it, but yeah, it's pretty much just a gas giant. It just kind of hangs out. That's what they do. So yeah, that's basically Farron in a nutshell. I'd like to thank all of our subscribers who kick in extra money every month to support content like my rambling about decrepit cities. And yeah, we will see you next time on Lore Maker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Thanks, guys. And now let's throw it over to Tyler Whitkin, our community manager out of our Austin studio, to find out who this week's MVP is.
Tyler, who's this week's MVP?
Hey there, Tyler Whitkin here, community manager in the Austin, Texas studio, here to bring you this week's MVP. A big congratulations to Haskaha for his weekly Star Citizen screenshots. MVP was a pretty easy choice this week, once we got finished discussing the stipulation that you would need to stop tagging us on Twitter so much. No, in all seriousness, your screenshots did an amazing job at capturing the thrill and adventure that makes Star Citizen what it is. My personal favorite being the Xi'an Scout duo that you posted on April 4th. In addition to posting screenshots, Haskaha also runs a YouTube channel jam-packed with Star Citizen content that's definitely worth checking out. So, congrats to you. Great work, sir. You're this week's MVP. Back to you guys.
That Mr. Haskaha certainly shots a good screen.
I've seen you retweet him. He's actually really good.
He is. It's really cool.
Yeah, and speaking of future art, let's see what's on the way in the ATV Fast Forward.
Be sure to tune into Reverse the Verse tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific on Twitch. We'll talk about that fast forward and all other aspects of Star Citizen's development.
I really wish my voice could get that low, but it can't.
I'm glad it doesn't, honestly.
With that, thank you to all of our subscribers for making this show possible. We will see you next week on Around the Verse.
Around the Verse.
Did you know that many of Star Citizen's developers are on social media? If you would like to follow Star Citizen on Facebook, you can find us here.
Or on Twitter, here.
And even Instagram here.
And for a full list of developers' personal accounts they're willing to share with the community, check out this link. You can find out what I bought on Amazon this week.
Star Wars stuff.
It was probably Star Wars stuff.